Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Kreisa with Hortonworks. And what I'd like to do is start off with some introduction of our speakers, starting with myself. I'm the VP of Strategic Marketing here at Hortonworks, and I am responsible for all of our go-to-market activity as well as some of our industry marketing activity that we do at Hortonworks. I'd like to turn it over to one of our other featured speakers, Charles Boyce. Charles, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Charles here. My clinical background is trauma critical care nursing. I made a transition into healthcare informatics about 15 years ago. And the work that we're going to talk about today is the work that we've done over at UCI over about the past 4 years. And with that in mind, I've recently made a transition to Stony Brook University. So my talk will be centered on the work that we've done there and the same work that we'll be doing here at Stony Brook. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to John to introduce John.
Thanks, Charles. This is John Haddad. So I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Informatica, and I focus on our big data and Hadoop solutions. Informatica is one of the leaders, along with Hortonworks, in big data technologies, and so look forward to talking with the rest of the panelists today to help educate our audience on some of the trends in healthcare and pharma and some of the techniques and architectures that we're seeing in this space. Back to you, John.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Charles, in advance. So let's move on to the next piece of our presentation. Actually, just to set context with the speakers and just for everybody else, I'd like to start today with a poll. I'm going to ask Kim to push that poll live. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take and make the selection that makes most sense for you, and we will share these results back with you. So where are you in your Hadoop journey? Meaning you have a couple different options. Are you just now researching it? You've heard about Hadoop and you're trying to figure out what it is. Or you're a little bit further down the track. You're currently evaluating some software, Apache Hadoop, or from a particular vendor, perhaps from Hortonworks. Or you're even further down the track and you're deep in a trial, understanding what the value of Hadoop is for you in the medical and pharmaceutical arena, what it can do around drug trials, processing of large amounts of data, structured and unstructured, and you're really starting to figure out where that value is. Or your last option there is, what the heck is this funny thing named Hadoop? So please do choose the option that makes most sense for you. We will give you just another few moments or a few seconds to fill out the poll, and then what I'm going to do is last chance, pick the one that makes most sense, and then I'm going to ask Kim to go ahead and close the poll and share the results back with our panelists and with you, the audience. So there we go. So it looks like a good portion of you are just doing research. So early days, trying to figure out where Hadoop fits in your overall, architecture, what it might be used for. So this is a good kind of educational webinar. I think you'll hear some great information from Charles and from John. A few of you are already starting to get going on the POCs, and then there's a few more who are really deep into using it. So this is good information for us. Kim, I will move forward now with the rest of the presentation. Thanks everybody for participating in our poll today. I want to start with a little bit of an overview of the big data market trends that we are seeing both here at Hortonworks and I'm sure from Informatica as well. So the big data market projections, according to IDC, are for a really significant amount of growth in this thing that we call big data, and I'll talk about it in a couple different dimensions here. One is the growth is going to be astounding, really more than 50x data growth between 2010 and 2020. So we're a third of the way along that journey, and data continues to grow very, very quickly. It'll actually end up somewhere around 40 zettabytes. And I'm not even sure how many zeros it is, but I know it's a lot. But the interesting thing about that is that 85% of that is going to come from new types of data. So that'd be data that you could use in clinical trials and other areas that perhaps you weren't capturing before, or new kinds of medical devices which are collecting data from patients and from others that allow you to analyze and understand behaviors and responses like you never could before. So it's new kinds of data that didn't traditionally fit into the traditional systems that you have. And in fact, the vast majority of that's going to be generated by machines, so by devices, by sensors, wearable sensors, wearable devices. Many of you may be familiar with a lot of the things that we're talking about. So this digital universe is going to expand substantially. It's going to create a large amount of new data, and that's actually going to create a lot of opportunity for us. So that data will be used, 65% of that data will be used to create new analytic applications. So, and in fact, they'll be built on top of Hadoop. Hadoop is the platform that can be used to capture these new kinds of data, to exploit that data within your organization, and it's typically done through new kinds of applications. So Hadoop enhances or extends what you could do with some of the traditional tools that your IT department might have been using around relational databases or database management systems. So it's pretty substantial. Now, Gartner also says that there's more than 20% advantage for organizations, competitive advantage for companies that leverage and learn how to leverage this data. So there's a substantial reason to learn the technologies, to learn how to use them within your organization because of this kind of coming wave of data. Again, we're only about a third of the way along towards a complete doubling of the data that gets created, but we're working our way down that path. And it sounds like many of you on our webinar today are really just doing research and trying to figure out how you can handle that data. And I hope you can come away with some additional information on how to do that. So when we talk about new kinds of data, what do we mean? What are we saying? This is new kinds of data or newly exploitable kinds of data. One of the benefits of Hadoop is it allows organizations to capture data which previously had been considered, I'll call it, exhaust data, data that couldn't be captured cost effectively or technologically before. And we see that data falling into 6 different categories. It's relatively neat categories of the different types that you will probably see within your organization. So one is sentiment data, understanding how somebody feels about your services or your products, or a drug or an offering or what have you. Clickstream data, how you might be interacting with customers or prospects or other people on the website. Sensor data, we talked quite a bit about that, the sensors that can be monitoring every kind of biometric function just about that comes out of humans, but capturing that data at scale. Geographic data, where is that data being captured? Where is the patient? Where are the people that you are trying to monitor? Server logs, so systems coming off of machines and monitoring systems and testing systems. And then finally, an unstructured data category, which is a little bit of a catch-all, but could be emails, videos, images, that kind of data. Hadoop can also be used to capture those kinds of information that you might be recording about your patients or about the people that have trials run on them. So really, this journey that most of us are on is enabled by Hadoop, and it's enabled by there's 3 different requirements that we see in terms of driving the overall adoption. One is capability that must allow the folks within your organization to exploit the skills and tools that they've already been trained in. It must also be integrated into your overall system, so it complements the existing data systems already there. So it's not a replacement for any of the existing tools that you're using to analyze. It actually enhances or extends what you're already doing. And then finally, it must enable those skills that are already there to be easily reused, meaning the integration must be at a deep enough level that if I already have skills in a particular tool set, or maybe SQL or some other tool, I can actually do that kind of analysis within the environment I know and leverage the skills and training that I've had before. So those are the 3 kind of driving requirements that we see for Hadoop adoption, and things are actually the adoption of the technology is accelerating quite quickly. So with that, I would like to turn it over to John Haddad to take us through a bit of his perspective. John?
Yeah, thanks, John. So, there's certain trends in healthcare really driving the demand for big data initiatives. And one of the key trends in healthcare today is sometimes referred to as integrated care. where the providers and payers work together to improve patient outcomes and reduce costs. And even, pharmaceuticals and medical device makers, collaborate also within this, ecosystem. And a recent study by Bain and Company, and here's a graphic from that study, points out that over the past decade, market conditions have evolved in ways that have enabled integrated care models to really emerge and that are influenced by healthcare regulations, consolidation of physician practices, increased digitization of healthcare, as you pointed out, John, and greater consumer engagement. And one approach at work, as you see to the left, is integrating all activities around a procedure or medical event, what's called an episode of care, such as a joint replacement, heart surgery, or a transplant operation. And this approach integrates pre- and post-procedures to improve patient outcome and experience. But it also lowers costs by bundling payments and applying readmission penalties, creating financial incentives to focus on outcomes. Now, the other approach that you see off to the right is focusing on avoiding these high-cost events in the first place through more of a patient-centric, what's called continuous care model. And this model focuses on really chronic care situations like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and other disease ailments. This approach works with patients to encourage treatment adherence. It leverages patient monitoring and health education. And, so using big data analytics, some healthcare organizations are able to identify and target patient populations that are likely to get the most benefit out of such programs. So this is one key trend that I feel is really influencing the need for big data analytics. Now, how do you turn big data into business value? The traditional business intelligence data warehousing processes and infrastructure that we've had in place for so long now really isn't scaling to meet the demands for today's big data initiatives. It still has its place. I mean, you still want to leverage that infrastructure, but instead of starting with the requirements, really what's needed is a data science or analytics team that starts by prioritizing the business goals. And as you prioritize the business goals, the team collaborates and iterates to discover insights, validate models, and transform the data that you see off to the left. Think of that as your raw material. Transform that raw material of big data into business value. Now, what's the people and process and technology that's needed to make this work? Well, I refer to this as a big data supply chain. So it's really your capability, your competency in the ability to acquire and store data at scale from many different systems. And of course, in healthcare, there's could be potentially hundreds of systems if you're a large provider or payer, and then refine and enrich the data so that your data science team can really start to play around with it, understand it, look for patterns, look for trends in the data sets, and correlate it with other things that they're seeing, and then curate these data sets over time so it's made available to others to as part of their discovery process, and then distribute and manage that data directly to the point of consumption, to the stakeholders that are really going to take action on this data or these insights. So ultimately the goal is to turn these insights into something that's operational that delivers value at that point of consumption, whether you're a doctor in an emergency room or a payer negotiating claims contracts for bundled procedures. Now, I also like to point out, going back to the business goal, that's where it all begins, right? Before you can really extract value, you need to really think about, what are the most important goals, right? And in healthcare and pharma, clearly improving patient outcomes, reducing patient readmits, reducing fraud, lowering the total cost of care. For pharma, raising clinical trial efficiency, improving safety and risk management, and for all of us, improving sales, marketing, and brand management. So that's where it begins. Now, there's certain KPIs or metrics associated with those that we measure on a daily basis to show that we're working towards achieving those goals, and that requires information. And information that's presented could be on a tablet device, could be on a desktop or a dashboard, but it requires certain types of information, which ultimately depends on data. It all boils down to data. And so in order to unlock this potential, whether it's taking EMR and claims data and sensor device data and medical device data and even social media data, in order to unlock all the potential that that data can provide, you need to integrate all of it. And you need to do that at scale. The team, as I mentioned earlier, needs to collaborate both internally and externally with their peers and partners and so on, especially as providers and payers reach out to each other and pharmas and physicians. And then leverage these new technologies that you're going to hear more about in this webinar series, deploy sensors and devices and other key capabilities like that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Charles Boyce, who's now at Stony Brook Medicine, but he's going to share with us some of the work that he did as a solution architect at UC Irvine Medical.
All right, thank you, John. And thank you for the 91 folks that are still on the line. Good morning or good afternoon to you. I'm going to just briefly walk you through the work that we did at UCI over the past 4 years, and talk a little bit about why Hadoop worked well for us and why we weren't looking for a technology and as opposed to see what we could do with it, but we found a technology that actually helped us. So that's kind of how I'm going to kind of frame our talk here. So really, the really interesting part of of this slide is that there's the new sources of data that are emerging, and we're going to talk about them a little bit, in a few minutes. But a lot of data is being generated in the home, Fitbit data and others that we've been able to harness, and we'll talk about that. The social media data that John alluded to, we've been able to harness that as well. And then when you talk about complexity, we have HL7, we have XML, we have a lot of varying different types of data. We also have data in relational databases. And our patients, although we provided a portal for them, we want to do a little bit more than that. We want to be able to provide them, a scorecard, showing how well they're doing both with us in our organization, but also how well they're doing at home and whatnot. And as we get into this even a little bit further, since we're now able to look at data in real time for monitoring equipment from ventilators and other devices within the hospital, we've set this up so that we can go from just pushing information out to then doing some predictive work, and then ultimately, when we're ready and the clinicians are ready, to do a little bit of pushing out prescriptive type information. So within the big data revolution, this is a very nice publication. I suggest that everybody Google it and take a look at it. But really, how can big data help us derive data in healthcare? Right living, the right care, the right provider, right value, and right innovation. So let's take a look at those. So along the right living, and I'll talk about a case at UCI as you're looking at the slides. So initially, for our senior center, we developed a methodology for our seniors to weigh themselves, and then we would monitor that and then push that information out. So if you're a congestive heart failure patient and you have a percentage weight gain over a period of time, we can monitor that within our big data environment and then push that information out to a clinician. And most recently, we've moved that out into the wearable side of things. Fitbit and others have open APIs that can be very well managed and harnessed. And that information can also come into, it's coming into the UCI big data environment. So, we can take a look at how many steps, what you're eating, your weight, whatever, heart rate, blood pressure, whatever you've decided to monitor on your own. And if you open the APIs, we can then take that in and we can use that information not only to notify clinicians that there may be a problem, but to take that information then and then combine that with data within the portal and show you that in the form of a scorecard. The right care, and I'll move this example into the inpatient side. So patients within an ICU environment. Now that we're able to stream the physiological monitoring data in real time, in our case, we only do it in 1 minute intervals. Real time isn't really that necessary, but 1 minute's fine. So, the ability to build algorithms, and we build algorithms around monitoring heart rate, blood pressure, respirations, and other clinical correlates in real time. So if we see a deterioration, then notifying the clinician, hey, look at in the last 30 or 60 minutes, this, and this has occurred. So that's giving them information. We're not quite ready yet to do it prescriptively to, say, hey, you might want to do this, and this. But this is the right care, at the right time. We're also working on our rapid response team notifications as well. The right provider. Again, using all of the data in its aggregate to what is normally referred to as, edge and vertices analysis, or, network or nodal analysis to, really understand, do we have the right provider at the right time? And again, you may be able to use a PA or a nurse practitioner as opposed to a physician for certain types of, preventative or, routine type of care. So it's just kind of looking at all of that information and understanding outcomes and things of that sort. The right value. So another another use case for this, since we do have all this data streaming in from all these devices for our folks in the biomed world, we actually know what devices are used more frequently than others. And with that information, we can then target that preventative maintenance, if you have to, and you have to, align your resources where they're best focused to get those devices in and have their PMs done and put them in the, the front of the line and whatnot. We also, with the ability to bring the RFID data in as well, you can, actually understand what those usage patterns look like and whatnot. And this actually helps with purchasing decisions. So if you're going to replace all of your, let's say, your smart pumps in a hospital, by having the usage data, you have a really great idea, of how many of those devices that you need to purchase. So, purchasing decisions can be made on that type of a thing. Right innovation. Again, we have developed this out so that researchers can now have a better understanding of a particular patient cohort, because with this technology, we can store it identified, but we can present it de-identified. So rather than using a cohort tool where you just get, age, sex, some demographic information, labs, and others, we can then refine that even further to be able to look at de-identified radiology reports, pathology reports, and so forth, so that you can get, if you're doing retrospective analysis or even prospective clinical trial type analysis, to really hone that cohort down to, those that are either going to be eligible, or if you're doing it retrospectively, those that really truly meet the criteria. So it ends that whole thing of, having to go through, stacks of medical records, whether they be paper or electronic, to find your suitable cohort. So, kind of, when they ask, why did you, really get into this? And, I'll have to answer it this way. The EMR, as good as it is, really is there to deliver care on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. It really isn't, although it has rules and such, it really isn't designed to really handle a really complex algorithm or to do the machine learning, or even pattern set recognition. It does what it does, and it does it well. But there's a need to present to clinicians even more advanced output of algorithms and such. And so that is one of the reasons we adopted this. Also, we all have enterprise data warehouses, but a lot of times they suffer from a latency factor. Many times 24 hours, but sometimes a week or even a month. So we really needed someplace that we could store all of our data in real time, in its entirety, and in its natural form. And what I mean by that is I take all of the data from the source systems, whether they be lab, radiology, or so forth, HL7, and store that in its entirety. Normally in an interface engine to the EMR, you cut certain things off. Not good. So if you're looking at something, let's say a laboratory result from the lab system, you get the time it was ordered, the time the blood was drawn, the time it hit the lab, the time it hit the analyzer, the time the result was ready, and then the time that the technician verified the result and went to the EMR. You don't get that information in the EMR. You get the time that it was ordered, time that it was resulted. So there's a lot of good, rich information coming from these source systems that we kind of chop off, to serve the EMR. So what I'm getting at is we found these technologies absolutely ideally suited to store the data in its entirety and in its natural format, and then we can serve it up to the use cases as we progress. And I think I touched on this with the idea of big data being complete data, where we're not having to make decisions. So in the EMR, you make decisions, right? And with a traditional enterprise data warehouse, we also make decisions around, how we're going to model it out. And then if some new source comes along, or there's a, change within the source, then we have to make some adjustments and whatnot. Within Hadoop, in HDFS, which is the system everything is stored in, you don't have to make those decisions. You have the ability to store it in its entirety and then serve it up to your various, whether they're data marts or others, and then you make those choices of what you want to put in any particular use case. And the point I'm getting here is that we can bring it in real time, and we can store it and worry about the use cases later. And it is a nice thing to be able to store data in its entirety, because we have no idea what our future use cases are going to be, and this relieves the burden of having to go back and do data pulls from other systems and whatnot. And again, the whole concept of all of this, of medicine, healthcare in particular, is to really be able to do something with that information or data to information through the whole data, information, knowledge, and wisdom continuum. And we feel that this is a good environment to do this. And I want to stop just for a second. This is not to replace a EMR, nor is it to replace enterprise data warehouse, nor is it to replace your existing data marts or analytic tools. This supplements everything that you have existing and helps you with those types of use cases you'll have in the future. So I firmly believe that there's absolutely no reason to throw away anything that you've got. Just use this technology to to supplant or enhance the work that you're already doing. Again, the name of we named it Serratore. In academia, you have to have a Greek or Roman god attached to it. Serratore is the god of actual cultivation and weeding. So it kind of worked here. So at UCI, we've adopted the Hortonworks platform on commodity hardware. We currently have 10 nodes, and with 25 years worth of data, less than 5 terabytes. So, many talk about big data as, all this lots and lots of data. Yeah, if we had all the healthcare data from the states, it would be big. But again, for us, it's a set of technology and a set of tools that allow us to do things with data that we would not have been able to do in a relational world, or made it difficult in a relational world. So people ask me, can it scale? Yahoo's up to, probably more than 60,000 nodes and probably way more than 160 petabytes. This infrastructure can be deployed in the cloud, although we in healthcare are not quite ready for that. We're getting there. We're eventually getting there. So if you want to use the term hosted, yeah, absolutely, it can be hosted within a cloud environment. At UCI, it's within our firewalls because, again, not everybody's ready to make that leap yet. For us, it's interoperability. So not only do we have in this big data ecosystem, do we have the Apache Hadoop components, but we also have MongoDB, which is another NoSQL environment. I also have a Microsoft SQL environment running with this environment. That's our replication from our EMR, as well as various data marts and whatnot to serve up the enterprise. I also use Neo4j in this environment, which is a graph database. So MapReduce jobs fill and supply Neo4j. Again, any tools outside, whether they be R or Weka or whatever you might be using, if you are in SaaS, Microsoft, Oracle, all of those tools play well within this environment. Again, this is something to enhance what you've got and not a replacement. So I'm going to go through some of the data sources and kind of what we've been, doing with them. So in healthcare, there's been a lot of legacy systems out there, and there's always that. What do we do with it? Do we shut it down? Do we keep it running? Do we do a crazy thing and try to transfer it all over to our new EMR? And that's a tough one too. So all of these legacy systems, including the one that was at UCI, which was a mainframe, have the ability to print to text. So what we did is we printed to text 22 years worth of data, 1.2 million patients, 9 million records, put them in the Hadoop HDFS environment, built a nice web-based view around them, and then put that within the EMR so the clinicians could, view the legacy data in context with the patient in the current EMR. Really nice exercise. This is actually how we got funded. In many organizations, anywhere from 200 to 600,000 to keep these legacy systems up and running, and not really a need to do so. Or you can print it out to a string and then bring that string into a relational model as well. And we've done that. We've done that as well. HL7 we touched on. All of these feeds. Again, one of the other things we did this because everybody in healthcare is all into slamming in the EMR, meaningful use, all this kind of stuff. We didn't want to encumber the existing staff, so what we did is we made it so that we could drop this in, use those feeds from the source systems with nothing more than the interface folks just cloning the interface engine. So they cloned it, and we now have a feed. We're able to store those. All the data that's initiated within the EMR, in our case, it was an all-scripts environment, Microsoft SQL. We just took advantage of stored procedures that allowed the user to view that information on screen. We just grabbed those, invoked those, and brought them into our environment. We talked about device data. So in your organization, in many organizations, they already have interfaces built between the devices in the EMR, and we just did the same. We worked with that device integrator. We developed a gateway, and now we have the streaming device data. So physiological monitoring data, smart pump data, as well as ventilator data. So anything in your organization, whether it be temperature, humidity, monitoring, RFID, whatever you got that can put out a signal, you can put it into a Hadoop environment and then do something with it. Social media, I have two teams of students from computer science and informatics. Over the past year, they've developed a system within this environment that monitors Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, the local RSS feeds. So basically a sentiment analysis dashboard for communications and marketing. And if you go that route, you'll learn a very, very interesting fact that patients and families are actually tweeting from the bedside. So that's quite interesting. So that was something that we hadn't been expected, but that is something that we did see, and it's interesting. So there's a lot being said out there about your organizations, and it's really interesting to kind of accentuate the positive, and then that's not so positive, it gives you an opportunity to get around it. So works great for that. We talked briefly about the home monitoring that we're doing, and then absolutely most recently, even before I left UCI to Stony Brook, we really wanted to take advantage of low-cost in-home monitoring solutions. And for $350 using some Fitbit and iHealth and some other devices, you can put a package together and with those free open APIs, bring that into your environment. Whereas many organizations are, and even new upstarts or startups are coming up with devices that have to go in the home, and they end up being pretty expensive. Anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500, and we wanted to take advantage of what was already out there and kind of lessen the cost. So that proof of concept is going very well. We talked about RFID, and then last but not least, we just had started a pharmacogenetics program. So basically, pharmacy, the genetic information, coming together for, initially it was for folks that were going to be placed on heparin and whatnot, but others have done very well on the genetic side in the Hadoop environment, combining that with clinical correlates. I think we talked about most of the initial functionality. What I didn't talk about on some of this was the analytics platform. So Tableau is our visualization tool enterprise, and we have a very nice Hive connector, which we took advantage of to be able to explore the data within the environment via Tableau. Again, because we're bringing this information in real time, it's a real nice environment to look at the data in its entirety for things around predictive, such as readmissions. There's a LACE criteria and there's other criteria, but we can enhance those algorithms because we have other data that over regression analysis and whatnot has been shown to be highly correlative to readmissions. So with all the information, you are able to enhance existing algorithms or create your own. We talked about the early sepsis and rapid response, and I think we talked about the social media analysis. So those are kind of our initial. Those were our initial things that we wanted to do, and that we've done over the past year or so. And we're working on more. There's more work around understanding relationships between clinicians, certain patient types, outcomes, and things of that sort. So that's kind of the work that we're kind of heading into. So some of the key takeaways: a development partner. It's really good to understand Hadoop and these other NoSQL technologies, and really understand what they're able to provide for you. But usually within healthcare, this skill set doesn't exist, and you really have to kind of go outside of your environment to initially bring on partners and whatnot to help you with the development. And that's a tough thing to do too, because you normally don't have enough of a skill set to even do that type of hiring, if you will. So rely on folks that have done it. Reach out to other organizations that have taken this path, and kind of get feedback from them, and really kind of do your research. A lot of this is really changing. There is a technology called Storm that's very much mature now that allows you to do a lot of this analytics in real time, and we're kind of moving from what we were doing initially with Mahout into a Storm environment, so that we can really take advantage of some of these new technologies. And think of these technologies as being supportive to what you've already got, not a exclusive set of tools, nor is it cause to rip everything you got out and start all over again. Let me see if I've got. So I don't have it, but again, if you were to look at a topography of our environment, you would see that all of the existing data marts, enterprise data warehouse, all of the analytics that were within the UCI environment are still there, and they're still there in total. They're just being fed by another system. So basically, this data lake, folks like to call it, is feeding those existing use cases as well as the newer use cases. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to my colleagues.
Thanks, Charles. That was a great discussion on the real kind of use cases and benefits of big data in healthcare. I thought the model of having right innovation, right value, right provider, right care, and right living was really a good framework for understanding how big data can help organizations provide better care and across a wide range of services. So thank you very much for that presentation. I think I very much enjoyed it, and I'm sure that our attendees did as well. So let me just cover a couple of quick next steps, and then we'll get to the questions. If you haven't already asked a question but have one, please do send it in. We view the Q&A panel. We've got some questions coming in. As far as next steps, you can learn more about Informatica and Hortonworks and how the combined solutions are helping organizations in healthcare to better provide services through to their constituents. You can go and look and try Hadoop for yourself or someone in your organization. There's a Hortonworks sandbox that you can download and play with. And then, of course, you can contact either of us at events@hortonworks.com. I'll put in one other plug. If you're looking to gather even more information, because many of you were doing initial research, there's a conference coming up called Newt Summit in San Jose, June 3rd and 5th, so about 6 weeks away from now. This is a very large community event on Hadoop. And so we just ran one in Europe earlier this year. This will be the Americas version. Lots and lots of content. 6 tracks over 3 days, 120 plus sessions, everything from the deeply technical inside of Hadoop and other projects to best practices around using Hadoop to customer presentations and user presentations from organizations like UCI, like from Charles, to talk about how Hadoop is benefiting those organizations. So business and technical topics, a very wide range of activities for you to learn there. So do consider that if you are on the research or researching Hadoop and want to learn more about it and immerse yourself in this open source community that is coming up. So let me step back, and then I will turn it over to Kim, who's been closely monitoring the Q&A to dole out a couple of Q&As here to myself and John and Charles.
Great, thanks, John. So one question that just came in. So in general speaking, how are healthcare organizations getting started with big data? And then pointing to Charles, how did you get started in big data? So let's kind of go with both Johns first to see how customers are starting with big data in the healthcare organization, and turn over to Charles for his answer. So John Cresa, why don't you go first? How are healthcare organizations getting started with big data?
Well, most of them are starting with, I think in a similar way to the way that Charles did, which is starting with a small project. And that's something we always recommend is start small in scope with regards to Hadoop and to the technologies that you have today, and look at the kinds of data that you'd like to capture and how you want to apply those to the business. So don't try to boil the ocean. You might think about all the different ways that you might use big data, a lot of the ways that Charles laid out, but we recommend that successful organizations and successful deployments start with picking a single use case and tackling that use case. It allows you to understand the tech, constrain the overall kind of problem set, understand the technology in terms of ingesting data, the ways that you can analyze data, the way that you can process and kind of visualize that information. And then once you've mastered that and been able to start to understand how to deliver value, then you can move forward with, with adding in some additional data sets or additional use cases. But start small in scope, single kind of data that you want to exploit.
Great. John?
Yeah, I agree, John Price. Get some quick wins under your belt so that you can prove out the value. And the trend that we're seeing is, as you start to get some quick wins and you start to get Hadoop into your infrastructure, you can start to build out a data lake. And as you feed that, data lake based on Hadoop with more and more data, it just kind of snowballs. You start to uncover more value, more trends. So, Charles had pointed out, several different types of data. You might start off with, some traditional data going into your data lake. It could be some EMR data or patient data or claims data, and get a quick win there. But then you might start to bring in social data or RFID information, and it just kind of grows and grows and grows. And that's what we've seen is, you start off there. And then I'd also say, try to leverage the existing skills that you may have today. I mean, if you have ETL developers that are doing data integration for BI and data warehousing today, we have the capability to leverage those same resources and make you productive on Hadoop using the tools that Informatica provides. So you don't have to necessarily go out and find a Java MapReduce developer to build this stuff. So those are a few words.
Okay, Charles, any best practices and how you get started in big data?
Sure. So I'll give you my first use case, which is replicable. So I initially, back in 2010, with the advent of meaningful use in knowing that CCD documents, continuity of care documents, were going to need to be produced, my first proof of concept was the storing of CCD documents in this environment. CCD documents are XML documents. They're very well marked up, and they store ideally. And with a nice little Lucene type of search engine on top of it, basically a Google type, the ability to query those CCD documents and find patients that meet certain criterias. And we even went a little bit further where we, de-identified the presentation. So what we found from that exercise is that we can store these documents in the hundreds of thousands, yet query them and get results back in sub-seconds. So if you have access to those types of documents, that might be a fun one to try out.
Great, thank you, Charles. Another question I think points to you, Charles. How are you handling HIPAA compliance?
Sure. So that's an excellent question. So the first part of that is we have kept this environment within our environment. Secondary to that, the gateway, what I took advantage of is I took advantages of the machines that were accessing this environment as opposed to people. So what I did for the logging of access, I relied on the logs from the equipment that was accessing versus the person that was accessing. So I could forensically, at this point in time, who accessed this information, that would lead back to the machine, that would then lead back to the person that actually was at the machine, making that query at that time. So I just utilized the logs from all of these, brought them into the environment as well. So that's, kind of my answer. So if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, look, who's accessing this environment? When they do, I would have that information. There are commercial products available to do that work. You just have to, basically Google Hadoop, security, HIPAA, and you'll find those. But we just kind of did it on our own in that way.
Great, thanks, Charles. I know that both John talked about starting small, but for you, Charles, what was the timeline like? When you start small, how long did that take you into where you are today?
Sure. So let's use I'll use the second use case. That was a summer exercise between myself and Naveen Ashish from the computer science side of things at UCI. Secondary to that was it was about a 6-month project, and that was the legacy data project. So as far as standing this stuff up, you can get the laptop, version standing up pretty quick. We use virtual environment at UCI, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but I will have to say that I did use a development partner that I've been developing with for about 8 years or so. So that helped me because they had that skill set. But for your initial point of care, by all means, you should be able to handle that yourself. And I will say this, that the folks in computer science, in bioinformatics, are very eager to help with these types of projects. So even if you're not at an academic medical center, if you're in some proximity, it doesn't hurt to call up the chair of either either division and say, hey, look, you got some students, they may even have faculty that are willing to help you with this. But there's a lot of people that want to apply these technologies to healthcare to get you started. So healthcare with these technologies is pretty exciting stuff for most of these guys.
Great, thanks, Charles. One other question, I guess, going back to when you explained your use case, Mark has a question. Is the EMR stored in SQL Server? And then the second question about that is, can you please repeat how you use Neo4j with MapReduce? Okay,
sure. Okay, so the UCI's EMR is a SQL-based product. So what I did is I took advantage of the replication services within Microsoft, within that Microsoft SQL environment. So I have a replicated environment of the EMR that has about a minute or so latency. So that's kind of how I did that. And then within that database, there are stored procedures that render information on screen. So I invoke those stored procedures at intervals and then grab the newer data from the EMR in that case. So Neo4j, so one of my favorite use cases for that is to be able to find associations between caregivers, locations, and patients with very, very similar disease types. So you're able to, with that application, you're able to find clusters of patients that are like and caregivers, because if you think about healthcare, it's pretty much generated at random. Whatever time you get to a hospital is whatever team's assigned to you. It's wherever you're located and whatever the schedules are of the nursing staff and others. So what I take a look at is clusters of patients that have had, let's say, better, more positive outcomes versus those that the outcomes were not as good or had greater length of stay or other things, and just try to find out, is it a credentialing? Is it years of experience? Is it their training? Is it, the team that they're on? And, try to find out, a little bit more about, what about those teams that makes them, more higher functioning than other teams. So that's kind of, how, I use that.
Great, thanks, Charles.
So I've got another one for you, Charles. And, I can make a comment sort of generally speaking about data as well. So someone's asking, they're an outsider from the healthcare profession, so they're asking, does your data from various sources come in a uniform or an established format, or do you encounter messiness? Did you encounter messiness, and if so, how did you handle that?
Sure. So yes. So the answer is yes and no. So information from source systems such as laboratory, radiology, pathology, all HL7, very structured. Matter of fact, it's all paired values, so it stores very well. Information from the EMR, depending on how you extract it. If you can extract it in XML or even HL7, fine. That works as well. Documents are where it's a little different. And I'll go back to if you think about your LinkedIn profile and liken that to a pathology report where you have different headers and subsections. So, storing those types of documents with some markup, understanding where those specific sections are, make it a little bit easier when you're then, doing jobs against it, for, natural language processing or other type jobs. So, yeah, for some information, you do have to do that. Twitter feeds and things of that are fairly well marked. You may have to run them through a pipeline, such as a JSON pipeline, and then store them as such. Those are folks that if they go the CCD route, I didn't want to get technical, but I will now. Basically you have to take those CCDs and run them and store them and represent them as JSON. So you basically build a JSON pipeline, store them, and then retrieve them that way.
Excellent, thank you, Charles. So sounds like a little of both in terms of the data, some structured and some some kind of messy, and actually that's kind of one of the benefits of Hadoop, I guess you'd agree, that allows you to put the data in any format, in its format that it comes, and then do the processing, only the processing required to get it to the state where you can make some sense of it.
And one thing I did not touch on that's really important to this audience is the images, and images are really important. So what we do is we store links to those images as opposed to storing those images, because in healthcare the last thing you want is your images replicated all over the place, because that ends up being very costly, and it's just not a very, very good practice.
I see. So you didn't. You were storing a link to where they were laying on disk as opposed to the whole thing.
Yes.
Great. We've come just right to the top of the hour here, according to my clock. I do appreciate all of the questions that have come in so far. I want to thank my co-speakers, Charles and John. Thanks very much for a great presentation today. It was very informative. And I want to thank all of our attendees who attended today. Again, there's more details on what you can learn in terms of next steps here posted, and as well, of course, the Hadoop Summit coming in June. And you can also join us on Thursday for an additional follow-on webinar that we'll be doing with Merck. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. Thank you, John. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate your hard work and presentation today.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.